Southern entered the 1960s with all the steam locomotive classes which it had built intact, except the King Arthur's and L1s, both of which were affected by the arrival of the standard classes and the Kent electrification. The latter released many comparatively modern locomotives for use on the Western Division, including substantial numbers of the versatile Mansell Moguls of classes N, N1, U and U1, all of which looked very similar. With their light axle loading and comparative power, the Moguls were popular for many of the rail tours that were arranged during the 60s as last runs over lines threatened with extinction, such as the double-track line from Christ's Hospital to Shoreham on the electrified South Coast line from Brighton to Portsmouth. Steam running over electrified lines was no problem at this time, this being a symbol of the Southern's long drawn-out transition from the one to the other. A number of cross-country lines weren't scheduled for early electrification. Amongst them, the line from Redhill to Guildford, which formed an interregional link to the Western at Reading. The Mansell Moguls were the regular motive power on the line for many years, but the line came under the scrutiny of the Beeching axe murderers, who recommended it for closure. This was a perfect example of how strict accountancy principles were irrelevant to railway economics, as the line was part of an effective London avoiding route. Wiser counsels prevailed, and the line was reprieved, with diesel-electric units known as tadpoles being provided from the 2nd of January 1965. From then on, its fortunes gradually improved, so that today it's an important artery. A pair of Moguls is seen near Gomshall and Shear Station, with one of the end-of-steam rail tours in the mid-60s. The Moguls had their origins in the First World War with the mixed traffic Ns, which were adopted as a proposed standard engine for all Britain's railways as early as 1920. 100 of these were manufactured at Woolwich Arsenal in 1920 as kits of parts. When the proposed nationalisation was turned down in favour of the 1923 grouping, 50 of the locomotives were bought by the Southern Railway and assembled at Ashford. From these came the general nickname of the class, Woolworths. They certainly didn't live up or down to this name, the first not going until 1962. Only one of the 80 Ns escaped the scrapman, whilst 4 of the passenger variant, Class U, survive today. The last of all was 31639, seen on a final rail tour with the last of Bulleid's controversial Class Q1 Charlies, number 33006. The latter was withdrawn in January 1966, but worked on for a few weeks, whilst the U lasted but a few months more, to the middle of June. The last members of the two-cylinder Mogul classes, there were three-cylinder variants of both, withdrawn by 1963, are seen at Rowfront, on the Three Bridges to East Grinstead line with another rail tour. They were to be the last pre-grouping design on the Southern. The oldest design on the Southern in the 60s was the Beatty Well tank. Their long careers at Wadebridge ended in 1962, but they returned to their old haunts in the London suburbs for 2 last tours in December of that year. Equally venerable were the Adams radials, but they were replaced by these LMS Mickey Mouse tanks, seen at Seaton Junction in the previous year. From 1965 onwards, the only tank engines to be seen on Southern branches were these LMS ones and the various standard types. The USAs became departmental shunters. On what remained of the Southern steam network, the Bulleid Pacifics and standard classes became the last steam survivors. The great Southern Railway electrification plans were to culminate in the laying of the Juice Rail on the Bournemouth main line, but it had to be done on the cheap. This became the last steam main line as, once again, government funding was restricted on what was potentially one of the most successful electrifications of all. The handover to electrics was natural evolution, but since so many Standards and Pacifics were available for the ever-diminishing duties, famous classes such as Mansell's schools disappeared well before the end. Bulleid's Pacifics, born in the war when the Southern's electrification plans had been blown off course, fulfilled their designer's intentions, though not as he expected. Rebuilt with conventional valve gear, they were effectively a new design in 1956. The last British mainline steam design of all, and they proved to be amongst the best locomotives ever. They were to be a fitting end to the story of Southern steam, although they had cruelly short lives. After the Kent Coast electrification was completed in 1961, all the Eastern Division's Bulleids were transferred to the Western Division, so it had 140 Pacifics. The 30 merchant navies were concentrated on the Western Division from the beginning of the 1960s, being used on the heaviest Bournemouth and West of England expresses, the Bournemouth Belle becoming the last steam-hauled Pullman train on the network. It's seen at Basingstoke, still immaculate towards the end of its life, although it would be withdrawn at the same time as the last of the Pacifics in July 1967. The appearance of the Belle wasn't typical of the last days of steam, but this unidentifiable merchant navy was. Nameplates were removed near the end, leaving just the backing plates, and cleaning was abandoned. The merchants started to be withdrawn in 1964, as the West of England main line beyond Salisbury had been transferred to the Western region on the 1st of January 1963, with the requirement for them to eliminate one of the duplicate main lines to Exeter. Not surprisingly, they chose to retain their own route, but the Southern line wasn't closed, merely downgraded from September 1964 to a secondary line. It was singled in 1966, a year which saw the closure of virtually all the ex-Southern branches beyond Salisbury, as well as most of the withered arm. The Southern continued to run steam semi-fasts to Salisbury right until the end of 1967, still using the famous head code displayed on this original West Country. The unrebuilt engines, there were 50 of them, were withdrawn in preference to the rebuilds, but as the end drew near, any failure meant withdrawal. The Lymington and Swanage branches were to be the last steam-worked branches, and were visited by specials using these engines. On the 9th of July 1967, the last day of Southern steam, there were still 2 original Bulleids amongst a theoretical 72 active steam locomotives, most of which were rebuilds. The Southern region ran 2 farewell specials a week earlier. 35028 Clan Line, due to be sold out of service a week later, is seen on one of these at Wargret, the junction for the Swanage branch.